Hello and good afternoon and welcome back to your HR for UK Back to a Friday webinar. We are just letting everybody join the webinar as I can see the numbers are busy climbing up as people get themselves settled in for an hour of listening to me, share with you what's to come next, the end of furlough, and of course what is starting to become the summer holiday madness. So we'll just give those individuals just a chance to get themselves settled, logged in, make sure you can hear me, and we will crack on very shortly. But of course, as always, you know, don't worry if you need to leave early or you have other commitments that you need to go to, because this webinar will be recorded and will be available for you in during the course of next week. So it looks like the numbers have settled down now in terms of all the attendees. So again, thank you very much for giving up your Friday afternoon to listen to me as I share my knowledge and information about the end of furlough, what next, and as I already said, that summer of madness. So just very briefly, for those of you who are new to these webinars, HR for UK, who are we? HR for UK is a leading provider of HR and employment law support. We also provide payroll and pensions, as well as health and safety services. We've got over 30 years of experience and we've got some fantastic 5-star reviews, and I would encourage you to go onto our website to have a look at those 5-star reviews for yourself, rather than just taking my word for it. I'm always very proud of what our clients say about us, but why don't you go on there and have a look for yourself and see what they say about us. So of course, for those of you who know me, Angela Clay, and for those of you who don't, of course, I am an employment law solicitor, and I'm of course managing director for HR for UK, and I'm responsible for HR for UK's role as a leading professional HR service provider for all UK businesses. For those of you who've been with me attending these webinars, I started off doing these webinars at the outset of the crisis, and at that time it was my vision was to make sure that your businesses survived the crisis, the pandemic crisis. But of course, now as we start to come out the other side of it, my vision is to make sure that your business remains legally compliant by sharing my knowledge, by offering you clear, professional, practical advice and support in whatever HR issue that may come across your way. So of course today we are going to be looking at what employers can do at the end of the furlough scheme when it comes to an end, what these changes mean for contributions towards those furlough payments we've already come to the end of July, but what it means in August and September. We're going to have a look at managing those accrued but not yet taken holidays. We're going to touch on the amber list countries, the red list countries, quarantine and pay. What do you have to pay? What do your employees have to do? We're going to also just have a quick look at some really good questions that are coming in. So again, it's like looking at questions like, you know, if an employee deliberately, knowingly goes to an amber or a red list country, is it a disciplinary offence? You know, how do we manage those last minute and short notice holiday requests, or even having to cancel holidays at short notice? We're also going to have a look at what we need to do is perhaps looking at a longer term holiday policy, whether we need to start looking at how this is going to change the landscape. And then of course we're going to have a look at what is going to come next. But of course, you know, these webinars are only as good as they are as you ask me those questions. So please do ask questions. Use the box on the right hand side. We have had some questions coming in and I was just sharing with my colleague. We've got some fantastic question and answers, and I am going to circulate them to you, you know, along with the recording of this webinar, because I think there's some really valuable information in those questions. Because of course, if one person is asking those questions, there is guaranteed that there is going to be another person in the room who is going to want to ask that same question. So please do use the box on the right hand side to ask those questions, and I'll be more than happy to answer. But of course, you don't need to use the software, the GoToWebinar software to ask questions. you can always drop us an email at info@hrforuk.com, or you can visit our website, which is www.hrforuk.com, or of course you can pick up the phone and give me a call. The number is 01455 444 222, and I'll be more than happy to answer those questions for you. So let's have a look at what we are going to be covering today. So we know that the coronavirus job retention scheme started over a year ago. It started in March 2020 and has had various iterations of the scheme, and it has now been extended for the final time, when it will finally come to an end on the 30th of September. Employers will no longer be able to designate employees as being on furlough leave after this date. And with the changes that have come out, the latest changes to the scheme is that there will be a change in the government contribution towards the furlough pay. And again, we're going to have a look at what that means for you, because of course for some businesses it's going to be quite a critical point where that comfort blanket, that lifeboat in terms of supporting you with your wage bill is going to come to an end. So we're going to have a look at what we can do there to help and support. Summer travels, as I've already said, is becoming relevant once again, with recent travel announcements, adding some countries to the green list, and of course looking at those last-minute holiday requests. But of course, businesses are going to need to start being prepared for these changes, and it's making sure that you're kept up to date with the latest changes, because of course these things change on a dime. We have seen it happen while people have been away on holiday. 1 minute it's all green, good to go, and the next minute it's all changed, sometimes while you are en route to your holiday destination. So again, let's get started. We are on the clock. It's just coming up to 7 minutes past 3, and I know I can talk for much longer than an hour, but I'm going to do my best to try not go over that 4 o'clock 1 hour time slot. So the end of furlough. So despite the Freedom Day coming and going on the 19th of July, there have been some restrictions that have remained in place. But of course, even though there have been some measures that have remained, there has been no corresponding change to the coronavirus job retention scheme. We all know that the scheme subsidised wages for employees who were on furlough, and as I've already said, this is finally going to wind down and come to an end on the 30th of September 2021. And of course, employers will now need to start making plans for that end date. We know that the scheme has been a lifeboat where businesses have been able to claim that grant for wages for their employees who have been on furlough, whether it has been on full-time furlough or flexi furlough. And employers have been receiving 80% of their wages for those unworked hours for a cap of £2,500, and of course a prorated rate for those who are on flexible furlough. And of course the employers have had to pay employer national insurance contributions, and of course the employer auto enrolment contributions. But of course, now that those changes are coming into effect, you are going to have to start paying in towards that contribution. So we already saw from the 1st of July that the contribution, there was that first step change where the employer had to contribute 10%. The government was only going to be funding 60% of that, whilst of course the employee always receiving 80% of their wages. That maximum cap was £2,187.50, but of course that was for July. July, believe it or not, has come and gone. So we are now going to take the last step change in the furlough scheme, which comes into effect from the 1st of August until the 30th of September, where the employees will still continue to receive 80% of their wages, but the government will be dropping their contribution to 60% for the unworked hours, and the employer will have to pick up 20%, and as well as having to pay the employer national insurance contributions and the auto enrolment contributions. Of course, that cap will drop as a corresponding amount from the government, and that 60% cap is £1,875, and that will be the same for September. But of course, from the 1st of October, there will be no grants available to the employer, and the employer will have to pay 100% of salary, regardless of whether that employee is working or not. So what that means for employers is that you must start looking now to see what the next stages are going to mean for you and your business. You need to take those actions early, because you need to make those early assessments of your workforce as the furlough scheme comes to an end. We know that the full burden of having to pay the pages, I can't get my teeth in today. I'll try that again. We do know that the employers are going to have to pick up the full bill of the wages, which is likely to bring in some organisation the prospect of having to consider redundancies. That is going to be in the forefront of many people's minds, especially those who have been on furlough for a very, very long time. Now, depending on the circumstances, employers will need to be mindful of their obligations under collective consultations, and we do have some cliff edge dates that are looming ahead of us. So just a quick reminder on those dates. So the 30-day consultation, if that is going to have to take an effect from the 30th of September, those 30 days consultation, your cliff edge day is the 31st of August. And again, for those of you who have to consult for 45 days as a collective consultation, that cliff edge day is even sooner, because of course you have to consult for 45 days. That means you need to start those consultations from the 16th of August. But of course, redundancy is not the only option. There are other alternatives available to you. So I'm just going to quickly whistle stop through some of those alternatives so that you can, have some food for thought before you need to make any decisions going forward. So the first one that you can consider is, of course, changing terms and conditions of employment. This will be reducing the entitlements, such as reducing pay, reducing the contractual hours of work, possibly considering about reducing or waiving benefits. Those benefits may be, for example, if you provide contractual company sick pay, which of course is enhanced payments, enhanced holiday, and bonus payments. If there are contractual arrangements, you will need to do a variation of terms, and of course that will be a process that you will need to go to formally make those changes. Another option available to you is, looking at other cost control measures. For example, you might want to consider pay freezes, or defer or decide not to make bonus payments. You might want to consider restricting overtime, or of course reducing or limiting any training costs that you might have previously approved. Flexible working, we all know that traditionally flexible working was always viewed very suspiciously by employers. But of course, the one thing that we have known about the pandemic is that flexible working has actually worked. And it may well be a way that employers and employee embrace these changes and offer flexible working. Now, flexible working has actually shown in research recently that it has become just as important as a level of a salary. Some businesses and candidates will not go to an organisation that doesn't offer flexible working. And flexible working can take a wide range of what it looks like. Flexible working could be a combination of reduced hours. It may well even be a combination of hybrid working, or a combination of a number of things. So flexible working has definitely come quite high up on the HR agenda. But of course, there is a legal process that you need to go through when considering flexible working. So again, be mindful to give yourself the time to be able to go through that process when flexible working is considered. You might also want to analyse your workforce. So if, for example, you use casual workers or agency workers, or you have some contractors, have a look at terminating those contracts, because of course they are not employees, they don't have employee status, and therefore you can terminate those contracts without the risk of having to face an unfair dismissal claim, or having to pay statutory redundancy pay if you have to go down a redundancy process later on. Unpaid leave is also another option that is available to you. So, for example, you might, and of course it wouldn't be something that I'm sure employees would be too open-minded to, but of course as an employer you might want to consider a temporary way of reducing your staffing costs by asking staff to take a period of unpaid leave. This way you will be able to retain them as an employee, but without the costs of having to pay that salary. It might be a little bit difficult to secure, particularly where employees are relying on that regular salary. But if you are going to enter into that sort of arrangement, it must be agreed by both parties. And of course, an employer can't enforce that as a unilateral decision. So again, it is about talking to your employees and coming to that decision together. Early retirement, and I know everybody takes a deep breath and saying, oh, we can't be looking at that. But of course, early retirement, the pandemic has not only made businesses think differently, but individuals have also looked at their own personal circumstances differently. And you may have employees who have had the opportunity to reflect and to have a look at what their own futures hold. And it may well be that you will be able to ascertain through open discussions with your employees who might be approaching retirement age, who might be considering and willing to take early retirement. Of course, you would need to have a look at making sure that the relevant pension schemes do actually allow that. But you might be able to sort of, have that conversation where you can introduce perhaps a reduction, a phased reduction of hours as they approach that retirement date. But of course, we know that there is no retirement age. So any conversations around considering early retirement or possibly someone, coming near to their retirement age needs to be handled with great care, because what you don't want to do is, whilst on the one hand trying to cut costs, on the other hand you open up a whole can of worms and you expose yourself to potential age discrimination claims. So of course anything with age, of course, do handle that very sensitively and with great care. There is, of course, layoff and short-time working, and of course this is got to be expressly contained within a contract of employment to allow an employer to rely on short-time working or layoff. Of course, if you don't have it in your contract, you cannot rely on it. So if you are unsure, do check the contracts or give us a call and we will have a chat and have a look for you. Just very briefly, layoff is where there is no work for employees and of course there is no pay for a period. But of course that is not for an indefinite period. It is for a prescribed period, and of course, with layoff there is no pay. And you will need to be mindful that there is a legal process that needs to be followed when layoff is invoked. Likewise, short-time working, it says what it says on the tin. Short-time working is where you provide your employees with less work and less pay for a period while you still retain them as an employee. As I've already mentioned, for both layoff and with short-time working, in the absence of a express clause in the contract of employment will be a fundamental breach of the contract if you do put an employee on short-time working or layoff if there is no express agreement. If you do not have layoff clauses or a short-time working clause in your contracts, you will need to consult with your employees to vary their terms. So again, it is a process that you need to go through to formally agree that variation of their terms of employment. Again, as I've said, there is specific legislation that governs layoff and short-time working. So before, even if you do have it in the contract, before you do actually invoke that, do take advice to make sure that we can make sure that you comply with the legal requirements, and of course you are aware of the associated risks that might come of that. Another option that you may have as an alternative to redundancy, of course, is a recruitment freeze. You may have put offers of employment out there, provided the individual has not already started. You may want to consider withdrawing those offers of employment. Of course, those are just some options. We can't pretend that it will be possible for employers to avoid redundancies in every single case, but hopefully I've given you some food for thought on what you can do. But do bear in mind, it is for the best move for your business, taking your business to the next stage of recovery, and if at all possible, to avoid those redundancies. But do get in contact if you have any questions, or if you want to explore any of the options I've mentioned, or if you want to explore something completely different. As I say, you can get in contact with us, and we'll be happy to help and support you, and most importantly, keeping you on the right side of the law. So let's have a look at holidays. The big question. Holidays are becoming an HR headache as the holiday season is upon us. I'm going to give you some top tips as an employer, and we're going to help you navigate your way through a summer of what we can only know as a summer of uncertainty. For both employers and employees alike, we're going to look back very fondly of the days where holidays was a simple matter of request the holiday, time off, manager approves it, jet set, and off we go. And of course, we return to work to share those lovely holiday pics with all our colleagues. But of course, with COVID, that has all changed. We've got these travel restrictions that are on us. And we're going to, which is leaving us with a navigational minefield, both for employers and employees. And of course, employees are going to ask lots of questions about what ifs while they are away. What if an employee cannot work due to self-isolation, or they have to quarantine? What happens to their pay, and what are the options, and what are your alternatives? So let's have a look at some of the issues that employers are possibly going to face, and what you should be doing now in preparation for what we know is going to be the summer of uncertainty. So we know that lots of employees will have accrued lots of holiday during the 18 months or so that we've been in grappling with COVID. So we've had lots of lockdowns which have prevented employees from taking their holiday, and employees have banked a lot of holiday. Basic entitlement of 4 weeks. It can be carried forward for the next 2 years. Bearing in mind we're actually halfway through the first year of that, but employees can carry holiday, those 4 weeks forward if they cannot reasonably or practically take those holidays because of lockdown restrictions. The carryover requirement is automatic. So again, if employees have not been able to take their holiday, it would automatically carry over to the next holiday year. And that is in addition to any of the employer carryover requirement, the employer carryover that you might have in the contracts, because some businesses do actually allow employees to carry over a small number of days to the next following holiday year. So again, you might be sitting on a lot of holiday that has been accrued, which means that some employees might have a lot of holiday to take. So how are employers going to manage the holiday requests, and how are you going to be able to make sure that you have that those roles covered as your employees take those holiday entitlements to reduce that? So will employers allow employees to take holiday at short notice? Will you be able to allow employees to cancel it at short notice? Are you going to be allowed to let employees give shorter notice to take on holiday on a temporary basis? Because of course many contracts of employment actually specify how much time and how much notice you have to give. So it's a question of, do we look at that, and do we albeit on a temporary basis, change those rules, and how do you communicate those to your employees? So all really, really good and valid questions. So what I would suggest is that you have a look at what holiday your workforce has, how much has been carried forward, and of course encourage employees to take time off, even if they cannot go away. Rest and relaxation away from the office does a world of good. So it's about understanding what that holiday accrual is looking like. How many days are we looking at? How many employees is it going to affect? And how many departments is it going to affect? So I would suggest that you start off by carrying out a holiday assessment to see what those numbers look like. Because of course, whilst those holiday days do continue to accrue, for you as a business, it is of course a liability, because if an employee does leave, you will have to pay out that holiday accrued but not yet taken holiday. So don't think of it as just holiday that an employee is accruing. Think of it as a liability that you are harboring until that employee leaves or takes that holiday. So start discussing holiday requests with your management team. Start discussing it internally on how it's going to be managed, and then make sure you explain it to staff so that your staff know what the expectations are. Of course, remember that holidays are for health and safety and well-being, so make sure that your managers and yourself, if you're a very small team, are speaking to your staff about taking those holidays. Start planning now for when employees might be away. Of course, you know, with the travel uncertainty, you know, you might have fewer employees wanting to take their annual leave this year. You might have a number of employees that are thinking, well, actually, I don't want to take it in the summer and I want to take it later in the year. Later in the year, we start, dare I even say it, start heading towards Christmas, at which time in some businesses, it is their peak time. And of course, what you don't want at that point in time is to have half your workforce trying to take their leave when you need them most back in the business to be able to make sure that you can, you know, manage that, you know, peak period within your organization. But it is also important that, you know, it is time off to rest is crucially important for employees and employers. And you should really encourage your employees to take that time out to avoid burnout. Employers will also want to make sure that you keep abreast of those employee annual entitlements and make sure that you implement policies so that you can manage those not only in the immediate future, but in the long term as well. So again, it's about managing what you have and what you don't have. So let's have a look at those famous red and amber countries, quarantine and pay. So we know that the government has introduced a colour code system, which means anyone travelling to a country on the amber list, subject to a few exceptions, will need to self-isolate at home for a period of 10 days after their touchdown back in England, or for 5 and 10 days if they are allowed to follow the government's test and release scheme. It also means that anyone returning from a country on the red list will need to quarantine in a designated hotel for a period of 10 days. We also know that the rules are going to be changing. We know that the rules on self-isolation are going to change for those who have been double jabbed. And those changes will come into effect and force from the 16th of August. So again, you know, it's continually changing, and it's understanding what rules are going to apply to which employees, because whilst there has been a significant uptake in COVID jabs, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody has been double jabbed. So again, it's about understanding your workforce, what rules are going to apply to which employees. So again, for all those jet setters returning to the UK, of course, before they even do that, they have to provide a negative COVID test before their return date. But, you know, this might impose, you know, all sorts of problems, because, of course, we know that you may not have any symptoms, but you may still have that negative test, which may mean you will have an employee who is stuck in their country that they have gone to go and visit. So they might have to quarantine abroad. And again, they might have to quarantine when they come back into, you know, the UK. So again, it's a moving field. It's a nightmare, to put it quite bluntly. But it's for employers to make sure that they are up to date as to what rules are going to apply to which employees. Of course, in the case of employees who have to quarantine, if they are able to work from home and they can work remotely, there will be minimal effect of having to self-isolate or quarantine at the end of their holiday, because of course they will be able to continue to work normally. And of course, if they are able to continue to work at home, they should be paid as normal. But it's not quite so simple where employees are not able to work remotely, because of course this raises a whole lot of other questions as to how do you deal with that absence from work. So some of the options available to those situations where employees cannot work remotely, so perhaps you can look at it as taking the additional time off as holiday. So of course, if they have accrued a significant amount of holiday, it can be taken as more holiday. But of course, you need to have a look at the impact that it might have on your business, particularly if you are having, you are expecting an employee to return to work and then of course they can't, particularly if you are working on a rotation basis of having some employees go off on holiday when others come back. So again, it's about managing your workforce, managing the possibility that if someone who cannot work remotely and what impact that is going to have on the wider workforce if they are going to have to take more time out. So as I've already mentioned, it can be dealt with as additional holiday. If there isn't accrued holiday for the individual to take, it will be possibly unpaid leave. But of course, if they are having to self-isolate because they themselves have symptoms or a member of the household has tested positive for COVID, they may be entitled to statutory sick pay. But again, you know, these are options. Even if there is annual leave available, you know, an employer can refuse that. You might want to keep that annual leave for another time. For example, you might have, you know, a business shutdown that you may have at other times in the year. So again, I'm going to start sounding like a stuck record. Make sure you are aware of what your employees' entitlement is, what they have taken, and what you will still need as a business for the rest of the year and beyond as far as holiday is concerned. So of course, we've talked about having to quarantine. So, you know, those 10 days, those mandatory 10 days. So if your employee is required to isolate or quarantine, they are legally required to do so. You cannot require them to return to work, even if they are symptom-free. You know, even if they have gone to a green listed company, we know that they may well have to quarantine when they come back, because there is the possibility and the risk that they may have traveled with someone who has tested positive. So even though an employee is going to a green listed country, it is not without risk. And as a business, you have to prepare for any eventuality that it may have an impact on your organization. So where an employee is legally required to quarantine, let's have a look at what those pay rights mean. So ultimately, it's going to depend. It's going to depend whether the employee can work during that current quarantine period, because of course, if they can work from home and they can work, they will get their pay as normal because they will be carrying out their work. But of course, if it's not possible to work from home, you are not obliged to pay them. It will be unpaid, which is why we've talked about perhaps using other methods of you know, accrued holiday. The reason why I say you are not obliged to pay them is because the employee is not able to fulfill their obligations in terms of their employment contract during that quarantine period. As I say, you could, of course, allow them to take time off as annual leave, or a mixture of annual leave if they haven't got sufficient to cover that period, or, of course, unpaid. Where an employee is required to quarantine and they are not entitled to receive statutory sick pay, do remember that statutory sick pay is only payable where they have symptoms of COVID-19, or they have been told to self-isolate because someone they live with has tested positive. So again, it is a whole can of worms as to what is going to apply. But of course, if in doubt, do get in contact and we'll be more than happy to pick your way through it and give you the right answer. So let's have a look at some questions that have come in. Is traveling to an amber list or a red list country a disciplinary offence? Technically, if an employee knowingly goes to a red or an amber list, they are knowing that they are doing so knowing that they will be unavailable to work on their return. So technically, yes, it could potentially be a disciplinary action. However, many people will have travelled in good faith and have been caught off guard by the changing of the rules. So how do you manage that? So whilst it would be possible to take legal disciplinary action against an employee, I would urge you to do so with extreme caution. And it's all about having those open and honest conversations before an employee leaves to go on that holiday, and to make sure that they are well aware of what those consequences are going to be if, for example, they know it's a red country and they are leaving when it's going to a red country. But of course, what would happen if they get caught out with the changing rules? We would advise against going down a formal and confrontational route. And of course, we will always advise as an employer, be prepared and be sensible about the circumstances that your employee is going to face. But of course, if you've had those open and honest conversations, you've explained the potential consequences to an employee and they still decide to go, of course, technically, you will be able to take disciplinary action. But of course, we will always advise to be sensible about your approach. So what about making last-minute holiday requests and requests to reschedule? I mean, that is going to be, a spreadsheet nightmare. You're in, you're out, you're here, you're there. So again, it's going to be feeling like, any planning of holidays is going to be a moving feast. And I know with my own holiday plans, it is definitely a moving feast. And it will be no different to you in your organisation or for your employees for that matter. Because of course we know that travel plans are changing, and when they change very quickly. So employees may want to cancel their holiday or change their dates at very short notice. Now, that is going to be an approach that you as an organisation is going to take. You might want to take a flexible approach, but you might want to say, our rules are going to be our rules. But of course, we would always advise, and of course this is the guidance coming out from ACAS as well, is to adopt a flexible approach. We are in uncertain times. We are in times where people will be doing things in good faith, and due to the constantly changing circumstances that we would think that we've got used to over the period of time, is still with us. So it's important about talking to staff, making sure that you set out very clearly what your expectations are, what those operational issues are going to be. Plan as much as you can, and again, appreciate that plans that may be put in place may change. We know the government has indicated that they are going to be reviewing the traffic light system, and they do so every 3 weeks. So you might have some employees who are yearning for that long-awaited holiday, and they're keeping a watchful eye on those updates. And of course, many of them might be taking advantage of those last-minute opportunities to be able to take a holiday abroad. So again, it's just about having that open and honest conversation, communicating with your employees and making sure that everybody understands what the rules are, not only the government rules are, but what your internal rules are, so that you can make sure that you apply them fairly and consistently throughout your entire workforce, so that you don't expose yourselves to some potential discrimination claims. So late holiday requests, again, this could lead to, you wanting to review your contracts of employment to see what those notice periods are. Because contracts of employment might actually have different, notice periods as what statutory notice period is. Of course, if there is no prescribed contractual notice period, statutory will apply. So just a quick reminder of what the statutory position is that employees must provide twice as many days in advance of the number of days that they want to take. So for example, if an employee wants to take a week off, they want to take 5 days off, it's 5 working days. The notice that they must give you is 10 days notice for a 5-day holiday. But again, you want to perhaps adopt a flexible approach if you can, if it is suitable for your organisation to be able to do that. You might want to allow employees to take holiday at short notice, and you might want to even allow that, particularly if you've got large amounts of accrued holiday accumulating there in the background. So the big question is, is it now a time to start considering whether there is, whether you should be looking at a long-term holiday policy? And what I mean by a long-term holiday policy is, do we need to relook at holiday policy, your holiday policy as you have it at the moment? Do you need to redefine your employee benefit packages from looking at what has always been normal? What is the new normal? Particularly in circumstances where you have perhaps you've moved away from that rigid office approach, where everybody is working in the office and working in office hours. Perhaps you have adopted more of a flexible approach where, as long as the work gets done, it doesn't really matter in which hours it gets done or where, you are actually carrying out that work. You might be wanting to consider, is it still appropriate to have that rigid holiday policy that matched the original rigid working hours? So looking at flexible holiday policies is not as straightforward as what it sounds, but it is still doable. So for example, up until now, employers have restricted the length of a single holiday that people and their staff may take. So for example, in many contracts, it doesn't allow you to take more than 2 consecutive working weeks away from the workplace. So you might want to look at removing that upper limit to allow employees to take longer periods away from the office. But if you are going to permit that longer period, do bear in mind it might be great to take all 6 weeks or 5.6 weeks off all in one go. But what does that mean for the rest of the year? So again, you will have to, if you are going to remove that upper limit, do give it a little bit more thought on what other issues may crop up. And of course, burnout becomes, a real problem that employers must make sure that you help your employees to manage. Some employees might be delighted to learn that, those restrictions have been lifted, but you still need to, as I say, look at the welfare implications that may have with your employees, because of course there is always that risk of burnout, and of course taking all that holiday in one time might actually increase that burnout. So again, it sounds great in principle, but it's about making sure that you have other measures in place to make sure that that is managed and monitored. Again, research suggests that adopting an unlimited holiday entitlement, may be attractive, but actually it does show that whilst it may have been introduced, the knock-on effect is actually fewer holidays have been taken. So of course there are some, big things that jump out and is a red flag to me. So if you are going to implement unlimited holiday entitlement, you must make sure that, the employees feel comfortable that they are able to take, time away from work. Management needs to ensure that employees truly feel empowered to be able to take their time off, rather than having a number up there. You've got 28 days holiday, and as you go through the year, you tick them off. If you're going to have unlimited holidays, it's about making sure that your employees do take that time off, and of course making sure you don't fall foul of the compliance with your working time regulations, which entitles your employees to 1.5 weeks holiday a year, 28 days, including bank holidays, if you are not quite sure. But again, it's about making sure whatever, holiday changes you may consider, the key thing is making sure that you have policies and procedures in place to support those changes in those holiday policy. So, for example, you need to make sure that you have a clear process that the employees need to follow to be able to request that holiday. Likewise, employers should have a process in place to make sure that you have the ability to reject any holiday requests that may come through, because it may not be operationally practical to be able to approve that. So again, it's about making sure that you have those processes in place and communicating it to your staff. Communication is absolutely king in any changes in the workplace. But of course, generally, communication is important. But of course, if you do not track holiday, you risk, employees who are not being allowed to take their holiday entitlement. It becomes, quite a complex situation when it comes to termination payments, because of course, how do you calculate what those holidays are if you are going to have an unlimited holiday approach? So whilst it sounds great to revisit your holiday policies, to implement changes, to reflect the changes that have taken place in your workplace, it is not without complication. So before you go down a rabbit hole to introduce all these wonderful new potential holiday policies, do give it some thought, and of course do come to us so as we can help you and make sure that you don't fall foul of the law, and to make sure, of course, that you look after your employee well-being at the same time as making sure that your business continues to grow. So the $1,000,000 question which comes next is what's next. So we know that Freedom Day came and went, 19th of July. I'm not sure if anybody celebrated what changes actually affected there. But of course, Freedom Day does not alter your basic obligations as an employer for health and safety at work. Of course, you must continue to take all reasonable steps to reduce the risks of risks to health and safety of employees, visitors, and to the public who are coming into your workplace. What the announcement does not mean is that there is an end to workplace precautions. Those workplace precautions do continue because, of course, that is the steps that you are taking to reduce those risks. So, of course, testing around, so measures in place in the workplace about masks, testing, hygiene, social distancing, screens, etc., etc., etc. We know that they're all in place. That remains for you as an employer to decide and, of course, be judged upon on your own particular circumstances in your workplace. It's not for the government to dictate that anymore. But, of course, if you are unsure, do carry out that risk assessment. It's been available, our COVID-19 workplace risk assessment. Before you take any of those measures away, carry out a risk assessment. It's free, it's downloadable, and make sure that you can, hand on heart, make sure that you don't fall foul of the Health and Safety at Work Act by taking all reasonable steps to reduce that risk. Okay, so the Freedom Day also does not alter the basic rights of an employee to stay away from work if he or she reasonably believes that going into the workplace poses a serious and imminent health and safety risk to him or her that they could not reasonably expect. We saw lots of this in the early days of COVID coming out, where employees were refusing to come into work because of their fears. We are now starting to see employment tribunal claims being heard in the tribunal, and it has been a mixed bag on whether it has been an unfair dismissal as a result of that fear, that imminent danger. So again, we do need to have a look at that you know, when, you know, looking at that. But as I say, you know, that stay-at-home order, that forced government order has been lifted. So again, you know, employees should be coming back to work, but don't forget, if they raise that imminent danger under the Health and Safety Act, do deal with it with caution, and of course give us a ring and we'll of course help you with that. The announcement does not alter, you know, how people are feeling about, you know, the restrictions being lifted. In fact, it might have the opposite effect of heightening those anxieties and other mental health states which have built up, you know, over the periods of lockdown. And of course, you know, but it doesn't alter your obligation as an employer to make sure that you deal with those, you know, anxieties, those mental health issues sensitively, and you accommodate that. And of course, you make sure that you, if appropriate, you know, you need to put in those reasonable adjustments. And I know it sounds like I'm saying doing one thing and do another. It is individual on a case-by-case basis, so don't get caught out by thinking it's okay for one particular employee, it may not be okay for another employee, and that's why we are here to help you. Do give us a call and we will help you. And of course, you know, the you know, Freedom Day that came, and the removal of all those restrictions, you know, it really changed the contractual status of working from home. Before, it was a government order, work from home if you can, and of course a lot of businesses, you know, force their employees to work from home at the beginning of lockdown. But from an employer point of view, this does not become a contractual right to work from home through custom and practice, because at the beginning nobody had a choice. If you are going to be allowing working from home going forward, it is an agreed choice. And if the employer is not going to, you know, agree to that working from home policy, it will revert back to the employee's normal working place, will revert back to being in the office. But of course, the onus will fall squarely to you as the employer. If you do not want your employees to continue working from home or in the way and hours which you have adopted during the lockdown periods, it's up to you to make sure that you communicated with your employees, giving them notice, to say that it goes back to the status quo of what it was before, and setting out what that is going to be. Because of course, if employees don't want to do that, they then have to make a choice as to what they want to do. You know, Freedom Day has had no impact whatsoever about flexible working, because flexible working requests still remain a statutory right. So again, whilst you have perhaps adopted that process during you know, the various lockdowns, and as we come out of it, and if you want to revert back to things as normal, it's not going to prevent your employee from putting in a flexible working request, requesting formally what they have been doing. And again, flexible working requests is a formal process that you need to follow. So again, if you get those in, please do treat them in the formal process that you need to, because it is prescribed timelines that you have to comply with. And of course, if you are going to reject that flexible working, it has to be on one of those grounds. And of course, if you have allowed it for the last, you know, 12, 18 months, it might be quite difficult to now say it's not going to work. But if you are in that situation, do get in contact with us. That's what we're here for. Let us help us. Let us help you. Let us help you help your employees. But who knows? Who knows what is going to be next? We simply don't know what the new normal is going to look like. So when I say what is next, I genuinely don't know, because we simply don't know what is going to be coming next. But what we do know is that you can rely on us here at HR for UK to be able to provide you with the help and support that you need. And you can contact us, as I said early on, through our website, www.hrforuk.com. You can drop us an email at info@hrforuk.com, or you can pick up the telephone and give us a call on 014 444 222. I nearly said double jab there. I almost got caught out. So let's have a look at some of these questions that have come in. So again, your questions are important to me. And of course, if there's one person asking a question, there's bound to be another person in the room asking the same question. So the question that has come in is, let me open it up. Can I check if furlough ends on the 30th of September? Did I hear you say that employers need to pick up the full costs from the 1st of September? Not from the 1st of September. Of course, it's the 1st of October because the furlough scheme continues until the end of September. End of September, you can still claim up to 60% of the wages through the coronavirus scheme, through the grant. Of course, if you are going to be doing that, you will need to top it up to the 20% because the employee will always be entitled to 80%. That was under the furlough scheme. As I said, the furlough scheme comes to an end on the 30th of September. So from the 1st of October, the full responsibility does revert back to the employer. You will have to pick up that 100% wage bill, regardless of whether the employee is working or not. So again, if that is going to affect you, you would probably want to be thinking about what other alternatives are available to you. So it's not from September, it's from the 1st of October. You've got to pick up that bill. So I hope that answers your question. So let's have a look. Rachel, thank you for your question coming in. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger so I'm not squinting my eyes so I can read what's going on. So Rachel, thank you. Your question is, if you are currently furloughed and after furlough scheme ends at the end of September, and the employer may want to reduce the employee's hours and hence the pay is reduced as well, if the employer decides then to make the employee redundant, can the employer try to pay you less redundancy due to the current reduction of hours and pay? And I'm just going to squishy this up because I can't actually see the rest of that question, but I'm getting the gist of what you are asking there, Rachel. So the question continues there. Due to the reduced hours, due to the reduced pay, do you by law have to pay the full entitlement for redundancy, or do you pay it on the reduced amount? So that's a very long question, and I've asked the question in parts, so I'm going to answer it in part. So the first question is if they have been on furlough and you are then going to go through the redundancy process, you will have to pay the redundancy entitlement based on what their original salary was. It's not calculated on the 80%. If, however, as a means to try and avoid redundancy in the first place, so for example, you have consulted with employees and you have consulted with them that you are going to be reducing their hours, and as a result of that, there is going to be that corresponding reduction in pay, and they have agreed to that, and they have started working those reduced hours and receiving the reduced pay. They've already agreed to that reduction. So if after that you then have to go down the redundancy process, it will be based on the reduced pay rather than their original salary. So the big thing to be looking out there is, at what point are you going to be making them redundant? Is it while they are still on furlough, or is it while after you have gone through that consultation period? The variation of terms, those variation of terms have actually been implemented. So in other words, they have already started working those reduced hours. They've already started receiving that reduced pay, in which case they've agreed to that reduction. then the redundancy is calculated on that lower amount. So Rachel, I hope that answers your question, but if I haven't answered the question correctly, just drop me an email and I will let you have that answer in writing. And in fact, in any event, with the Q&As, as you know, we always collate all of those. Look out for that answer, it will be in there. So we've got another question that has come in is, right, so Bhavana, thank you for this question. Your question is, where does the employer stand if they prefer some employees to work from home permanently and the employees are not agreeable without extra payment? Now, that's an interesting question. Because of course not everybody likes to work from home, but actually from our experience, people working permanently from home has actually had a reduction in pay, but again it's gone through consultation, and the reason why I say that some people have agreed to permanently work from home in exchange for reduced pay is because of course those commute costs have been taken away, so employees have been agreeable to that change. But there is no reason why there should be extra pay for an employee working from home. Now, it may well be that the employee is referring to the extra pay as a contribution towards their heating, their electricity, and I think you've just popped it into the question there, their utility costs have gone up. Of course, the employee can claim for, you know, a change in their tax code if they are working from home for that contribution in relation to their utility bills. So again, that is something that they can claim directly through HMRC. They can log onto a website, and of course, Bhavana, I can send that out to you. And again, not to pick on anybody in particular, I will circulate it out with the questions that will go out after this session. So yes, utility bills will have gone up, but of course they won't have that commute cost. So it's a balance. You know, you win in one area, you lose in another area, but there is no obligation on you as an employer to increase their wages because there is that working from home. And as I say, the employee themselves can make a claim to have a change in their tax code to be able to claw back some of that the costs of working from home. So I hope that has answered your question, but again, I will get that out to you as part of the questions that we have. So another question that's come in, can I still require my employees to take holidays at a specific time like I did during the furlough leave? That's a brilliant question. Yes, you can. And it is possible to request your employees to take holiday at a specific time. And again, you know, when I talked earlier, I talked about carrying out that holiday audit. But again, if you as an employer are requiring your employee to take holiday at a particular time, you also have to serve twice as much notice as the holiday that you are requiring an employee to take. So for example, if you want your employee to take 1 week's holiday, you have to give them at least 2 weeks written notice to take that holiday. And it's a really good way of managing that accumulation of holiday. And of course, remember that liability I was talking about. You want to make sure that you keep that reduced. So carry out that holiday audit, and if appropriate, serve notice for your employee to take time off. But of course, don't forget you need to serve twice as much notice as the time that you are going to require them to take off. Sometimes it comes as a blessing for employees. Some employees will want to push back on that because they are perhaps trying to store up their holiday to take at another time. But as an employer, you are perfectly within your rights to be requiring an employee to take, you know, holiday at a particular time. It might just be one person, or it might be a whole group of people. So again, it is, you are perfectly within your rights to do so. So the last question that's come in here is, if an employee wants to travel abroad to a country requiring quarantine upon return, do I have to allow them to take the annual leave and have unpaid leave to quarantine? Again, that is a brilliant question, but I think I have actually answered that during the webinar. But just to recap on that, if they are going to have to quarantine, it will depend on what the reason is that they have to quarantine. It may well be because they have COVID symptoms, in which case statutory sick pay might apply. It may well be that there isn't, in which case there is no pay, because if they've gone to a country that is on the red list, they have gone there knowing that they are not going to be able to do their work when they come back, in which case it can be unpaid. But of course, you might want to use up that accrued but not yet taken holiday. So again, a brilliant question. I have whistled through all of that and I have barely come up for air. I do have a document which I am going to circulate, which has 15 questions relating to the holiday uncertainty, the holiday, navigating through the holiday of the summer of 2021. I do not take credit for these questions. I do not take credit for these answers. They are just questions and answers that I have collated from a number of law firms who have written articles about it. I have thought that they are very valid and very interesting, and I'd love to share them with you. They are quite legalistic, but I think if you take the time to read through it, if you're not sure, do come back to me. But as I say, I will circulate these. The authors who have written these questions will be accredited for it. So again, you know, this is not me, it's not my work, but I do think it would be valuable to share this with you, because I think, you know, it would be helpful. So I've got no more questions that have come into the box. Dileth, Rachel, Bhavana, thank you very much for those questions. But of course, I know what it's like. You're going to go away, you're going to listen to this webinar again. For those of you who are not able to stay on, you know, do get into contact with us with some more questions and we'll be more than happy to help. But of course, our services are not just about furlough, it's not just about, you know, HR issues. We can help you with payroll needs, we can help you with training needs. We've got a fantastic new platform with e-learning, from DSC assessments to bookkeeping to GDPR reminders. The list is endless. So if you are looking at some of those training needs, they are very, very cost effective, very affordable. Do get in contact with us and we can have a chat to you about your training needs. As I say, it's all gone online. We have this amazing portal where you can log in and your employees can do those courses and of course get a certification at the end of it. Of course, we're well into the Kickstart scheme. You know, we're at, well, we've just gone past the halfway mark. At this point in time, the Kickstart scheme is open and operational until the end of the year. We can still, you know, make applications on your behalf to become a Kickstart employer. Here at HR for UK, we are taking part in the Kickstart scheme ourselves. And I'm very pleased to be saying that we will, by the end of September, have 3 Kickstarts who are young workers that we are helping to get back into the workplace. We are training, we are developing them, and I'm looking forward to seeing them grow personally and professionally during their time with us. And I know that we are supporting a number of employers with the Kickstart scheme. If you want some more information, again, please do get in contact with us. For the last time, I'm going to share our website. It's www.hrforuk.com. Email is info@hrforuk.com, and the telephone number, you've got it, it's 01455 444 222, and do get in contact with us. So just very quickly, for our next webinar is going to be back on a Thursday. It's Thursday, the 26th of August, again at 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. And I'm going to be getting a guest speaker who's going to be joining me. Andy Gorham is going to be sharing the screen with me as we start looking at things, as we start coming back into the workplace. He's going to be talking to you how to make it sticky from the inside. If you are interested, he does have a podcast. Go and look for him, Andy Gorham. and it's about the workplace and the importance of re-engaging with your teams as you come back into the workplace, whether that's remotely or whether it's actually physically in the office. And Andy's going to be sharing with you the 4 proven engagement enablers. And I, for one, am very excited to listen and hear what he has got to say. So for everybody, have an amazing weekend. Until next time, I'll see you back here on the 26th of August at 3 o'clock, and have a fantastic weekend. Stay safe. Bye for now.